Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Maggie Blume, the sales evangelist at Mailshake. And today we are speaking with Alli Rizacos, Imposter Syndrome Coach and founder at Alli Rizacos Coaching Incorporated. And today we'll be talking about experiencing imposter syndrome in sales. So Alli, thank you so much for being here. Do you mind taking some time to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Alli. I'm an imposter syndrome coach. But before that, I was in sales for about 15 years and spent a lot of time at Salesforce. I was at Salesforce for 8 years. And then I had different stints at different startups. And it's kind of where I ended up having not studied sales or anything like that, like everyone else. But it made total sense for me personally because I really love human psychology, and I really believe that sales ultimately at the end of the day is just your degree in human psychology, right? So it really worked out for me. And then I found my passion of, I didn't find it, but I got in tune with my passion of coaching 8 or 9 years ago. And then almost 2 years ago, left the corporate world to pursue that passion full time. And here I am now as an imposter syndrome coach, working with other sales individuals. So ICs in sales, leaders in sales, that's kind of my sweet spot.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's human psychology, like you said, at the end of the day. And I bet a lot of those skills that you learned in sales have helped you out with coaching now in a totally different light. But just being able to talk about it, understanding human psychology and, helping with that motivation and helping other people along the way in sales too. So,
and I felt the opposite too. Like coaching really helped me be better at sales.
Really?
Right?
How so?
Yeah. Well, learning how to be curious and actually listen and ask good questions, right? Because essentially like a sales deal or an opportunity, it's like a showdown between one brain versus another, basically, right? Of like, the buyer getting in their own way, the seller getting in their own way, And so many times, as a sales rep, my like prospect or my customer would say to me like, "Oh, I feel like you're like my therapist right now," because I would just like get into their world, and ask them personal questions. Because as much as like, yes, they're just buying software, but it's an emotional decision. So we have to tap into their emotions in the end of the day. Like people don't buy features and benefits, right? They buy from an emotional place always. And so coaching is coaching allows you to dare to go there, like dare to be vulnerable with people and dare to ask questions that other sales reps aren't asking. So I actually found it helped me so much in my sales career. The year I got a coach was like my best sales year ever. I went to club, the whole thing. Yeah. So
amazing. Yeah. And I love that you said it comes down to
getting a coach if you're in sales.
yeah. It means we should all be getting coaches so we can hit our quotas and go to President's Club.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I love that you said the two questions. There's two of my favorite things in sales is prospecting. I feel like a detective. So
me
feels
too.
like
Yeah.
And the second thing is questions. And then I feel like a psychologist. So that at the end of the day, because when I first started out my professional career, if we want to call it, I never really thought I was going to get into sales ever. And when I think about those two things, not that I don't like sales, I've learned to absolutely love the profession of sales. But I love thinking of it as like, okay, I'm going to put my detective hat on and now I'm going to put my therapist hat on. And it's like, it makes it way more fun for me, and other people have their analogies around it. But I love that you said that coaching really got you to think about those questions, also got you to be on the same playing field with someone too, with like negotiations and things like that in sales, and ultimately led you to your best year there too.
Yeah, I felt the exact same way. I loved being a prospector. Like we called it a BDR. So like my favorite job, because it was like, ooh, like this person's connected to that person. And what if it was like doing all this investigative work. And then my second favorite job was being a manager, because, well, then I got to really coach, right? And I really got to be a therapist, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's maybe just like I need to stop online stalking as a hobby.
Yeah.
But that's what's so fun about it to me. But cool. So,
Totally.
Alli, this conversation sparked because I had a recent episode with Amber Dibert about imposter syndrome. We were specifically talking about it in the Great Reshuffle. So she talked about, tactics you could use for imposter syndrome while people are changing jobs so often, and with layoffs that are unfortunately going on right now. And one thing that led us to the conversation today and where she had referred me over, which I'm so happy she did, is she said that imposter syndrome is when you are in your sweet spot. But what I kind of pointed back at her is like, how do we always know that? Like, are we really in our sweet spot, or are we feeling imposter syndrome, because we need a change or that something else going on there? So the question I have for you is, what happens if we aren't in our sweet spot, and what is imposter syndrome telling us there?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's different flavors of imposter syndrome, right? And I don't think Amber's wrong, but I think that's only one flavor of it, right? Yeah. Like, I think what she was probably trying to point out is, of course we're going to have self-doubt when we start new things, but you're starting something new. So the opportunity for growth and, all these things is present. So, if you're someone who really craves growth and that sort of thing, then great. You're right in the space. You're right in the sweet spot. Right. But then there's the other flavor of it, which is kind of where I take a stance, or I kind of really dive in, which is that, I think we often think of imposter syndrome as like, oh, like I feel like I'm a fraud, or like, someone's going to find out. But for me, my imposter syndrome was true in the sense of like, I was being an imposter in the sense that I knew that what I was doing wasn't what I actually wanted to be doing. And that I was putting on a mask every day and showing up and, putting on the show for everyone that I like wanted to be there, and that I, had all my shit together. Sorry, I don't know if we can swear, but
no, you can. Okay.
And so like ultimately, like I was an imposter to myself, right?
Okay.
And so that's kind of the two different flavors, and the work that I do is really around helping people leverage the fact that they're aware that they're feeling like an imposter, whichever way it is, to take that as an opportunity to go inward, right? Because we've been taught, I should say, to use like the external world as our barometer and our dashboard, right? Like, oh, like go to school, get a job, like make more money, title, status, la 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 la, right? And then brag about it on LinkedIn, I guess. But right, there's like all these like steps of like what you're supposed to do for people to take you seriously and for people to think that you're successful.
Yeah.
It's for people to think you're successful, not for you to actually be successful, really, because success is a completely subjective word. Like I could describe success to me right now, and you could too, and it would be two completely separate things, right? Yeah. The problem is that oftentimes our definition of success has converged because we're using the external world's definition of success, which is like the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos and the money, right? Everyone is around money and attention. That's what like success is. But what I found in my own experience, and then what, really propelled me on this crusade, is that like, but I did that. Like I was successful. Like I made lots of money and I got lots of promotions and I had lots of attention and I had this brand, and I'm like, I'm still suffering though inside. Like my existential crisis of being a human still exists. So like, wait a second, who lied to me?
Yeah. What's going on here?
I was promised that this was the way to be happy, right? Because otherwise, like, I don't know, why are we what is success really? Isn't success a means to be happy? Right? And so I was like, oh my God, like, what's happening? Like, I'm doing all the things and I'm not happy. Like, this is, something's got to give, right?
Yeah.
And so what I found was that, like, I was being an imposter in the sense of, like, I wasn't listening to myself. I was listening to the external world's definition of success. And I was using the external world's dashboards, right? Money, status, likes, whatever, right? These like measurements that the external world uses, and making that the way to fulfillment. And it just never worked, right? Yeah. And so the only way that I've found to actually feel happy and be more fulfilled is to go inward and to actually find out what my values are and what motivates me and how I want to use my time in the, this short amount of time that I have on this planet. Right. Because, and go do that, because if I don't, then I'm being an imposter. Right. So I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a coach, and I knew that for sure because I had a coach for a long time. I just, when I'm coaching, it's like time expands, right? Like it could go on forever and I don't even know, right? Like it just, I'm so immersed in it, right? Like I'm in flow, and I could talk about it till the day I die. Like I will always be interested in humans and psychology and coaching, right? So I just knew like, this is clearly what I want to be doing. And every day that I wasn't doing that, I was being an imposter, right? Yeah. I was like literally putting on like a show in my own life, right? Yeah. Versus just living the life that I wanted to live. And the only reason why we don't do that is because it feels scary too, because there's the opportunity to fail at what you really love, right? There's the judgment that you could possibly get for doing it a different way, like all of these consequences that we see from, choosing ourselves and choosing what we really want, because it might deviate from the norm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I'm going on a ramble. So
No, you're fine. You're fine. No. I love how you put it though. And kind of just from differences, like you said, there's a couple different aspects of imposter syndrome. And in your case, and what you help people through is, where you actually are an imposter. It's not that you feel like you're an imposter, you feel like a fraud. I'm feeling like an imposter or fraud because I'm doing something that's not really aligning with what I agree is success in my own world. And exactly. I have a story about this because I remember it was like when I first was in sales and I was interviewing for a job at ADP. I was interviewing for an SDR role. This is about 4 years ago. And I talked with the recruiter there, just asking, those questions that are like, hey, how do you like ADP in your experience there? And I was telling her about my goals. Like one day I want to become a manager in sales and, go like that. And then all of a sudden she stopped and she goes, I've never wanted to be a manager ever. Like I've always just wanted to be an individual contributor. I have a family at home that I manage basically, and I don't want to do that at work. And I've been a recruiter for the last 10 years here, and I absolutely love it. And like, it was so shocking for me to hear that because I was like, that's amazing. Like I keep getting told like, hey, you're going to become a manager one day, or the next step is becoming a manager. And everyone sitting next to me when I was an SDR at my job at the time was on track to be a manager or want to become a manager. And I think like, it just made me kind of start realizing some of these things that you're talking about. Not that it became easy for me to think like, okay, well, I don't want to be a manager anymore. Yeah. But it made me realize like, wait, that person's like living their life. She sounded so happy about where she was at. Yeah. And, that was never in her picture of success. And it came maybe from different things where, it's just like, I don't know, it shocked me. I still remember that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what was shocking about it is that she like deviated from the norm, right? And she was following her own path and not this path that like we were handed out when we were born of like, okay, this is what your life is going to be like if you want it to be successful, and just follow these steps. Right. And that's inherently why people don't deviate from it too, is because there is no steps to the other path, which is, starting your own business or, doing your own thing. You have to make it up. And people really like certainty. I mean, like it's just like a universal need that we all have, is to feel certain and to go out on your own. Like I did, almost 2 years ago. I mean, I got so much praise and like so much, like everyone was like, oh my God, like this is insane. Like insanely cool for you, but like people were just like over the moon about it because it was finally like a representation of like, oh my God, like you could do that. Like you could just leave and do your own thing. Like I'm allowed to do that. Like, it's like this permission thing. Like, we don't even give ourselves permission to do it because of the fear of uncertainty and failure and all these other things.
Yeah. And I like how you were talking about it. It's like, it's almost like stripping down anything that we were told, or these paths that we were told of like, hey, this is what success is going to look like for you. And just realizing like, okay, what do I actually want to do? Like, how do I want to fill my time every day? Things like, I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that, but at least thinking about it that way. And that's what sparked from that conversation I had. And just going into it, I know you were talking a little bit about your experience, like one of your last years at Salesforce, it sounded like. Because I know you had brought this up a little bit right before you switched over to, or you had worked in some startups there, but you said when you hired a coach and you were working at Salesforce, it actually ended up being, you know, your most successful year, but you were still feeling like an imposter. But, you know, how did that experience really help to where you are today?
Well, I think what's funny is like, yes, I had my most successful year as an AE, at least at Salesforce. And like, listen, was that cool? For sure. Like, that felt amazing. But lasting fulfillment and happiness? Absolutely not. Like, that dashboard refreshes real quick, you know? And that's the other part of it, is that like, you know, like understanding what the goal actually is, right? So I call myself a hyperachiever. It derives from what we call saboteurs in the coaching world, which is like our self-sabotaging thoughts, right? Okay. So my saboteurs, like my gremlins inside my head, or my inner critic, I'll call it, is this hyperachiever telling me that like at all times I need to be productive and I need to be the best, and achievement is what will make me feel enough, right? Yeah. And so I did it. Like, I reached that mountaintop, and then I realized, oh my God, like, now what? And you just create another goalpost, right? And it keeps moving, right? And so how that experience really helped me kind of come to today was that I think we're all stuck in that trap, you know, of this like thinking that achievement in itself will bring us lasting happiness, right? And like, listen, obviously we want to achieve things, of course, like, we want to grow. We want to like produce things, of course. But it's the misguided belief that it's like our salvation, right? That if we achieve, then we will be, all of our problems will go away, right? And so what kind of brought me to you know, this point today in my coaching and whatnot, and what I help my clients reframe for themselves is I don't believe that achievement is the thing, literally from experience of knowing that it didn't work for me. Maybe it does for people. I don't think so, because I mean, the richest people are often the most miserable. That's kind of like a proven fact, right? So what I help them reframe is it's not about achievement, which is kind of just feeding your ego. Yeah. It's really about impact. And impact I kind of break down into two things, which is like growth and community. Okay. So like the impact that you can have on the people around you, right? On yourself, and really breaking it down into how that helps you grow and how that helps your community. Because ultimately our like deepest needs as humans is to feel like we are a part of something, like we need other people, right? And we also need to be growing in order to feel like we're like allowed to be around in this earth, right? Like that when we're stagnant is when we literally, our minds feel like we're going to die, right? And so if we can make it about that instead of achievement, that like biologically speaking will satisfy us for longer, because it's literally satisfying these deep, deep needs that a human has. Whereas like the need for achievement is all just your ego. Like that is not like a survive. You do not need achievement to survive. Literally, you know, like it's not like a baby doesn't need to achieve anything to live, you know, like, right. But a baby does need a mom and a community around it to survive. Right. Like, and so really shifting our focus away from these kind of egoic standards of living around achievement and really making it about impact. And so that's what I really help reframe for my clients who are, I call myself a workaholic. So are all of my clients, right? Because we become addicted to our productivity as the measure of our self-worth, right? Yeah. Because the more you can produce, the more you can achieve. So, and it all just feeds itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we're focusing on, I love what you said, impact, not achievement. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really hard thing for sales reps to do, especially when we have these metrics, these different milestones. And it's really one of those things where I've been in college sports before where everyone always says like, hey, the greatest funnel for a sales rep is college sports, and I used to be a sales recruiter at some point. They were like, look for people who played sports before, were part of whatever. And, it's because you have like, I'm trying to beat my own time. I'm trying to, hit the leaderboard, things like this here. Yeah. So especially, okay, let's talk about this in a remote perspective. And I just want to know, like, for a sales rep listening to this right now, who's working remote, what's like one thing they can do to shift their mind from like, hey, I need this achievement to focusing on impact? Because I think impact can be harder from those two things you said of the community aspect. And there's definitely ways to build community and feel part of a community online. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what's one thing that a sales rep can do to kind of shift like, okay, I'm not going to focus on achievement. I'm going to focus on this impact that they could do today.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things that are coming to my mind. And, I want to say like up front that like, listen, the sales world is like the hardest because everything is measured on achievement. Right. Yeah. And like, it's no shock that like the best sales rep that you want to recruit is a competitive athlete, right? Who is also driven by that egoic part of ourselves that wants to achieve and wants to be the best. Like, yeah, we're feeding into each other's insecurities, right? Like that's honestly what the sales world ultimately is like, ooh, this person has a chip on their shoulder and thinks that they're not good enough. Perfect salesperson, right? Yeah. Because they'll just fight to the death. Like that's why it was perfect for me. Like I never felt like I was enough. So every day I got to fight to the death to prove that I was, right? And I definitely needed to prove it because otherwise I felt like I wasn't worth it, right? So it's like, it's a hard, like sales is structured for those people, right? So we're all the same and we're all in the same bucket. And it's hard because they're using our weaknesses against us, right? Yeah. Like, ooh, look at this achievement, right? And dangling it in front of us, right? So it takes like Herculean effort, like quite frankly, to switch the focus and to not let the dashboards and all of the measurements and achievements not get to you, right? Like it's to some degree, it's impossible because you're taking in that information every day, right? The only way to not is to not be in it, right? And I'm not saying that you need to quit sales in any way, but so what I did, right? Because I truly love sales. Again, I get to be an investigator and a therapist at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the ways that you can reframe it around impact, right? And not making it about achievement is making it about building different skills, right? So like I never actually went to school for psychology. I went to school for languages. But I deeply regretted never going to school for psychology because it's actually what I love. And so I wasn't really at a place in my life where I wanted to go back to school. I was already at Salesforce, like no time, whatever. And so I switched my focus away from like needing to be the best sales rep in the entire world, which like not a thing, like who would measure that? I don't know what scale we measure that, right? Like, and so we just have to like throw that out as not even a real thing. And I switched it to like thinking about my job and my interactions with every customer and prospect and whatnot as literally like my master's in psychology, right? Like switching the focus from like, what can this experience bring me other than the need to prove myself, right? So for me, it was like the skill building of like, I am literally getting my master's, maybe even my PhD in psychology at this point from like literally interacting with humans every single day, but interacting in a way where I have to like guess and like know what they're going to think and say and persuade them. And like, I mean, it's literally psychology, right? And so I made it about something else for myself so that it wasn't about achievement and it was more about the impact that it was having on my future, right? Like if I'm getting my master's in psychology right now through this experience that I'm having, that's going to set me up to be a coach one day and to have, you know, the experience and the skills that I need for that. So that's one way to think about it too, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the other subtle mindset shift is, you know, now I'm not in the sales world, but LinkedIn is like basically my sales world, right? Because that's where I post content and that content creates leads and, you know, obviously so on and so clients and so on and so forth. And, you know, there's two mindsets that you can take to it, just like in sales, right? It's like you look at this person as like someone that can make you hit your quota or miss your quota, right? And you're going to bring a very different energy to that person because it's like make or break for you. Or you could look at it as, how can I connect with this human on the other side of the line? Like, how can I make this a moment of connection and community versus about my ego, my achievement, my need for, recognition and all that kind of stuff, right? And I even see it with myself on LinkedIn. I've been doing that journey for almost 2 years now too. And, you know, I can fall back into that mentality of like, this is a business and like, I need to get clients and, you know, and it doesn't work. Like in the sense that like that desperation never breeds fun for you or more of what you want, right?
Yeah. Or for the other person too.
Of course. Yeah. They don't like
it as well too. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I'm just like natural, like all of my best friends are from LinkedIn. Like I have such a big community on LinkedIn and I truly love them. And when I'm focused on that is when people just like show up and like are dying to work with me, right? Because it's like my energy is so different, right? So I don't know, but those are two tips I guess I would give in terms of thinking about how to switch the focus, right? Make it about something else for you. And then also make it about connection and community.
Yeah. I love those two things. And like you said, the growth aspect of it. So growth doesn't mean like this achievement. When you get this promotion, that's achievement. That's not growth. And for you, is growing all these different skills and looking back at it. And there's so many different skills you can learn in sales, whether it be writing, you know, talking on video like we're both doing right now, talking with people in general, listening, pausing, learning how to not use the word like, which I'm also working on right now. But all these different things, that you can learn just on a day-to-day basis. And instead of being so concerned in the back of our heads, like, hey, I need to hit quota. Hey, I need to hit quota. Hey, I need to book this many meetings. It's like, hey, today I learned how to effectively negotiate at the beginning or something. Or today I learned this new tactic that's helped me. And I think it is where we really take those pauses back and we're not so focused on achievement. Just like you said, when you're not so ingrained in it, that's when you start all these new conversations, when you're really just in your community helping other people. So I love that. And I love the journey that you've been on and what we were talking about before of like, you know, we all think we've been given this path and we need to stay on this path. And I heard you mention on a podcast recently that, you know, some top performing reps get into management because it's like the typical next step, kind of just like the same conversation I had with that person from ADP, even though they might not be passionate about leading people because it's different. I've never been a manager before. I've been an interim manager when my boss was on paternity leave and I really felt like good at it. But it was different. It was totally different from what I was doing. So do you feel like when we do get into those next steps, so like those next achieving steps, is that where people feel a lot of imposter syndrome or where that kicks in? Because, you know, it's different, but it also just might not be the path that they want. It's just the path they're going on.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's both, right? It's like if starting any job, you're going to feel some level of self-doubt because there's just a lot of unknown, right? Like, I mean, that's just like literally the natural way of how your brain operates because your brain is always looking for certainty at all times because your like limbic system is like, am I safe or am I going to die? So it's always scanning to make sure is safety available, like here, present now, or am I going to die, right? So when we don't know what we're about to get into, your brain's like, like, cause our brain, processes like social threats as like looking stupid or whatever, as if you were going to die, right? It's like, it's now like merged. The whole physical physical danger is the same as like social danger and emotional danger. So when you don't know what you're about to go get into, your brain's just like, oh my God, like this is unsafe for us, like abort, right? So it's just your brain doing what it's supposed to do, right? Trying to keep you safe. So that's normal to feel like the self-doubt. But I think, totally the whole manager thing, especially, is like the path, right? Like you are more successful, I think, is what we think, if you become a manager. And that if you never become a manager, that means you have not reached the pinnacle of success. I feel like that's at least what we all are telling ourselves. I don't know if anyone's ever said that out loud, but I think that's what we're all telling ourselves, because I see it in a lot of my friends. Like, they'll say like, oh, well, I haven't gotten into leadership yet. So like, I need to do that. And I'm like, says who, what's that about? Especially because like leadership is not for everyone. Like it is not easy at all. And it is a completely different skill set. Like it has nothing to do with being good at sales at all. There's no transferableness there, really. Right. And so you're really taking on like a completely different career when you get into leadership. Right. And it's again, like that moment for yourself to check in. Am I just following what the external world is telling me that I need to do in order for me to be successful in the eyes of the external world? Or am I following what is actually true for me? And an exercise that I often have my clients do, I was just talking about it with one of them, is to like literally, you actually do this over like at least 3 weeks, because you need quite a bit of data, but like every kind of meeting that you have in a day and every activity that you do in a day, you just take a quick kind of snapshot of it in terms of like, did this activity bring me, did it increase my energy or did it drain my energy? And was I fully engaged or not really engaged? Like, was I like looking at other tabs and like trying to do other shit during this thing? Or was I like immersed in the activity? Right. And so after 3 weeks, you'll have, lots of data about many different types of activities. And you'll start to see like, what are the types of activities that I like am immersed in and that give me energy. Right. And that will tell you about what you actually like doing. So a lot of the time it kind of breaks down into, especially in leadership, there's like the coaching aspect and the development aspect of being a leader. Right. And then there's like all the operational stuff of being a leader, right? Like the forecasting and the, all like the strategy and the
numbers,
right? Ops and But then there's the coaching, and some magical people like both, but typically you kind of like one or the other. And if you're getting into leadership, you probably mostly like the coaching side, to be quite honest. Like less people like the operational side. There is a lot, but and so even in that distinction, it's like figuring out like, well, what are the activities that I actually like doing? And so stacking your calendar to do more of those and maybe less of the ones that are not your sweet spot, not the things that you care about. Right. Because again, we have a finite life and there's only so much time that we get in it. And it's like, choose the things that you actually like doing on a day-to-day basis instead of feeling like you just have to follow this path because this is exactly what the world told me I was supposed to do. Right. So it's all about really checking in with yourself and figuring out what do you actually like, instead of, was I just told to like this? Because that sometimes happens too, right? It's like, wait, do I actually like this? Or was I just like told that I should like this? And I just like it now because other people also like it,
Yeah. And you put it so simply, even though we don't think this way. It's like, what are the things I actually like doing? How can I double down on those things? And how can I grow within those things too? So just like you said, you wanted to learn about human psychology. So you took this approach one of your last years at Salesforce of, hey, I'm going to like, these are the skills I'm going to learn. This is what I can double down on. And I think that's amazing. And I think that's where, we we process like celebration around achievements. Cause like obviously when someone becomes a manager, that's like a congratulations, which that's great. I mean, there's a lot of milestones in our life, like you said, that there's achievement out there, but that's not really what's motivating us. It's that growth behind it. So I think we need to like congratulate people or celebrate wins from like the growth perspective or being parts of community and having those in between.
And I feel like we need to start congratulating ourselves for doing less. Like it's like
I'm in for that.
Congratulating someone if they like take a vacation or like take the day off, right? Like instead of being like, like, are you sure that you need to take this day off? Right? And I mean that's like an entire culture shift, but that's kind of like the world I'm trying to live in now with like my community and my clients, which is like them doing less is a Herculean moment because it's actually really freaking hard to do less and be okay with doing less. It's like really uncomfortable.
Okay. Feeling okay with doing less.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. And I hope we get to that space and we're in communities of that space where we can congratulate people for doing less and, just having it as a norm. But Alli, it's been such a pleasure talking with you today. And I could talk to you about this stuff forever because it interests me totally. But where can people learn more about your coaching, some services that you offer, or just learn more about you in general?
For sure. Yeah. I hang out most on LinkedIn. So Alli Rizacos on LinkedIn. And you'll also find I have a free masterclass on imposter syndrome. So if anything today kind of hit you and you're like, ooh, like that was interesting, I go into way more depth in the masterclass. So that's free you'll see it on my LinkedIn page.
Awesome. Yeah. Go follow Alli on LinkedIn, be part of the community that she's building right now there. And
if you want to do less.
You're welcome. I'm in for it. I'm part of her community now too, just following her on LinkedIn, and she posts some great things and just really interesting of her story too. So thank you so much for sharing that today, Alli, and being on here.
Yeah. Thank you for your great questions. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll catch everyone next time on Shake Sales. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.